a bunch of the proof, not just one or two pieces of proof, but a long list of proof that Israel knew October 7th was coming, and this was posted by Censored Men. 1 year ago, Israeli military and intelligence officials obtained a 40-page document which outlined Hamas's battle plan for October 7th. Israeli authorities codenamed the document Jericho Wall. The document did not set a date for the attack, but when compared to October 7th, it becomes extremely clear that Hamas carried out the attack almost exactly as the blueprint showed. The document called for drones to knock out security cameras and automated machine guns along the border, a barrage of rockets at the beginning of the attack, and Hamas fighters to pour into Israel via paragliders, motorcycles, and on foot. All of that took place on October 7th. The blueprint that Israel obtained was almost identical to October 7th. They also said in the blueprint that the aim was to take roughly 200 to 250 hostages, which was almost exactly how many they took. It was like 200 some hostages. Hamas also had information on sensitive Israeli data. This would be another piece of evidence that somebody within Israel was involved. The fact that Hamas had so much access to sensitive data. They knew details about the location and size of Israeli military forces, details on Israeli communication hubs, details on key Israeli military bases. This led to Israeli officials suspecting leakers within Israel's security establishment. The 40-page document circulated widely among the Israeli military and intelligence leaders, but they claim that they thought the attack was such a magnitude that was beyond Hamas's capabilities. Now, we can move the debate. You can move the goalpost as to did Israel know that October 7th was going to happen? And you can move that to did they know but just think it wouldn't happen? They knew all the details. They knew every detail. And I would say that's an impossibility. There's no way Israel knows every detail of what's going to happen and chooses not to stop any of it. And the idea that they don't have a crazy number of spies within Hamas and a crazy amount of surveillance of Hamas means that Israel would also know when things were ramping up. And there's evidence of that as well. By the way, this is the New York Times article. I've shown this New York Times article probably 2 or 3 times on this show, saying Israel knew Hamas's attack plan more than a year ago. That's from the New York Times. Even the liberal New York Times wants you to know Israel knew about this attack a year ago. Okay, so then here's 3 months prior. In July of last year, a veteran analyst with Unit 8200, Israel's signals intelligence agency, warned that Hamas had been conducting training exercises that were very similar to what was outlined in Jericho Wall. So 3 months before, they go, hey, they're behaving just like the blueprint thing he said they would. Hey, they're doing the things. They're getting ready for the thing in the blueprint that we read, that we all read. You remember? You remember the thingy? The analyst said, quote, I utterly refute that the scenario is imaginary. The Hamas training exercise fully matched the content of Jericho Wall, she said. Quote, it is a plan designed to start a war, she added. Quote, it's not just a raid on a village, unquote. However, a colonel in Israel's Gaza division brushed off her concerns and said the exercise was part of a totally imaginative scenario and that it wasn't anything that Hamas could pull off. I mean, you guys can let me know. I want to know your take on whether Israel just knew every detail, like literally every detail of what was going to happen October 7th, and yet at every level of the Israeli military, the Israeli government that knew, at every level, no one decided to take it seriously. Considering the amount of intelligence, amount of surveillance they have on Hamas, the odds of that are non-existent in my mind. But I do want to get your take on whether that's even possible that Israel could just ignore all of this, considering most of what Israel does all day, every day is decide how to terrorize Hamas and Palestinians and how to stop them from having any impact on Israel. Then, 3 days prior, okay, so now we're getting close. And if you want to make the argument that, well, they knew exactly what was going to happen, but because they didn't know the date, they were still caught off guard by the exact thing they knew would happen. Well, you can't even make that argument because 3 days prior, the head of the U.S. House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, told reporters that Egypt had, quote, warned the Israelis 3 days prior that an event like this could happen. Quote, I don't want to get too much into classified information, but a warning was given. Furthermore, an Egyptian intelligence official told AP News that Cairo had given the Israelis multiple warnings about something big being planned in Gaza. Quote, we have warned them An explosion of the situation is coming and very soon, and it would be big. But they underestimated such warnings. Did they? Or did they perhaps want their own 9/11, their own Pearl Harbor, their own big moment that would allow them to commit genocide? And again, we know that the IDF killed hundreds of Israelis on October 7th. If you didn't want Israelis to get hurt on October 7th, maybe you wouldn't have killed hundreds of them. I'm just spitballing here. Just an idea. If you cared at all about Israeli civilians, maybe you wouldn't murder them all. Is there an idea? Murder hundreds. Just saying. Netanyahu denied that he ever got such warnings, which to me, that may be one of the biggest pieces of proof that Israel wanted this to happen. We know Netanyahu got the warnings. There's no way Egypt, the government of Egypt, contacted the government of Israel, said, this is happening and soon, and no one told Netanyahu. It was just, they were like, he's having a case of the Mondays. I don't think now's a good time to tell him about the fact that there's going to be a massive attack. It's a real solid case of the Mondays, like really strong one, didn't have a good Shabbat. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. And then there's the insider trading that went on. Traders earned millions short selling stocks days ahead of October 7th. Unidentified traders made wagers against the worth of a bundle of Israeli stocks just 5 days before Hamas entered Israel. This resulted in a significant spike in short selling of that fund, according to a study by New York University School of Law and Columbia School of Law. Our findings suggest that traders informed about the coming attacks profited from these tragic events, Jackson and Mitz wrote. They said the short selling that day far exceeded the short selling that occurred during numerous other periods of crisis, including the recession following the financial crisis, the 2014 Israel-Gaza war, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're saying that even other big crises didn't have this level of short selling, meaning someone didn't just know there'd be some Hamas attack. They knew this would be a large Hamas attack, that this would be significant. And this was even covered by the Washington Post. So again, and you may have friends, I know people who, if you say, oh, they knew about October 7th, they go, I haven't seen it. That's not true. What are your sources? Much of this is even reported in the mainstream outlets. There's a New York Times article. There's a Washington Post article about the short selling. You can't understate just how much surveillance Israel has of Gaza and Hamas. The idea that they wouldn't know is just stupid, really ignorant of the type of surveillance Israel's involved in. And the fact that there were videos of Hamas training on the hang gliders that they themselves posted on Instagram. So really the only debate, in my eyes, the only debate that can be had is whether Israel knew about this and is just so dopey and negligent. They're just bumbling fools and they just didn't even think to ever do anything to stop it, or whether Israel knew about this and they chose to allow it to happen in order to justify a genocide. Because we know they don't care about the hostages. So if they don't care about the hostages, because we've seen how much Netanyahu's fought against the ceasefire at every moment because he just wants the genocide to continue. He doesn't want hostages back. He would prefer they all die. So if they don't care about hostages and they don't care about Israeli civilians, then this is a great plan for them, right? You got to think in the mind. You got to put yourself, in the mind of a psychopath. If you just want to kill everybody in Gaza, but you want it to look like you were doing something else, you weren't committing genocide because it looked bad, then what do? Well, you have to have something to spark it off. You have to have something to allow it to happen. You have to have something to pretend to justify it. You need an October 7th. And now we see also that Israel's ethnic cleansing steadily in the West Bank now. So that proves that this isn't about Hamas. And then, of course, I brought you all the other evidence that Netanyahu and the others are looking to wipe Palestine off the map. Literally, Netanyahu, 12 days before October 7th, in front of the UN, held up a map of Israel with Palestine and Gaza erased.